Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. The Seattle City Council has just completed the first phase of a comprehensive plan process meant to shape how and where the city will grow over the next 20 years. So, what does that really mean for your neighborhood? I'm talking with Councilmember Mark Solomon, the Council's Land Use Committee Chair, to get some perspective on that and what to make of a new $8.9 billion budget proposal from Mayor Bruce Harrell. We're discussing those issues and the questions you're sending in too, next on City Inside Out, Council Edition.
Let's find a way to make sure that the priorities we have for the people of Seattle continue, because while the federal funding may have gone away, the needs have not.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. And here he is. Mark Solomon is the interim council member from District 2 in Southeast Seattle. And Councilmember Solomon, for someone who came in as a caretaker, not a candidate for the job, you've been taking care of quite a lot. So I thank you for taking the time with me.
Well, thank you very much.
Let's get into it here. Top of the news here in late September is the mayor's budget proposal, which he recently unveiled. It's an $8.9 billion package. That's up from $8.3 billion last year. And as the mayor pointed out, he's trying to respond to a multi-million-dollar city deficit, an unsettled U.S. economy, and the threat of cuts to the city's federal funding coming from the White House.
With Trump's economic chaos and a fluctuating national economy, we were faced with a forecasted revenue shortfall of over $200 million. We took immediate action, extending our hiring freeze, stopping non-essential travel, training, and technology upgrades, and moving forward bold proposals to advance our priorities and safeguard funding for critical programs. Because of this effective approach, we are able to propose this budget for the future without touching our rainy day fund and without new layoffs.
So, Councilmember Solomon, when I hear no layoffs, not touching the rainy day fund, that sounds a lot rosier than what the council was wrestling with a few months ago back in June with that pessimistic economic forecast. Then, what is your take on the mayor's proposal? And I have to ask, what could change when the council gets an updated economic forecast in October?
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because as you pointed out, the forecast we got a few months back was bleak. When people have come to us and said, hey, here's our budget, that's and everyone going, yeah, that's nice, we're broke. Right? So, but I'm also looking at the reality that, as the mayor pointed out, we cannot count on the feds at this point. Even money that was supposed to be coming our way, money that was supposed to be allocated for transportation, for housing, for
this
human
recession
services.
we've heard about, yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. When I first got here, I remember being asked, with the potential of federal cuts, what should we do? And my response was, okay, if we're going to get cut off from the feds, let's find our own money, right? Let's find a way to make sure that the priorities we have for the people of Seattle continue, because while the federal funding may have gone away, the needs have not. Yeah. Right. So what I'm looking at in this budget, not only what the mayor has proposed, but we as council can put forward, is how do we make sure those essential services continue? How do we ensure that we provide for services for unaccompanied minors that wind up in our country? How do we make sure that there are legal services for those who need it? How do we make sure that we have legal advice or tenant assistance for renters to make sure that they can stay in their home, so we're not putting more people out on the street because they don't have the technical assistance they can tap into to help them navigate that, so they don't wind up in front of, eviction court.
Yeah. I did want to talk about one specific part of the budget. We had a viewer that wrote in this question here. What do you think of the mayor's proposed plan to raise the sales tax and use the money to fund an expanded care team? This is a 0.1% sales tax hike authorized by the state. As you know, it would bring in about $40 million a year. The mayor's talking about expanding the care team, community-assisted response and engagement. This is the 911 alternative responders that go out to lower-intensity 911 calls, like a person laying down on the sidewalk, for example. So the care team has been doing some great work, Councilmember Solomon. And on the other hand, this plan would give Seattle one of the highest sales tax rates in the U.S. What do you think about this issue?
Knowing the care team, knowing the work they do, and knowing that we need that service to expand citywide, right? however we fund it, right? Now, it would be ideal if we didn't have to go to one of the more regressive tax solutions.
Or venues or vehicles, excuse me.
Tax vehicles that there is, which is the sales tax.
Yeah.
Yet, we're in a position where we really don't have an alternative. And yes, sales tax is high. Yet the services are so needed, and they're so needed in every part of our city. And again, I know the work that the care team does. And as we're talking about alternative responses to, an officer showing up,
Yeah.
care team is it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I favor, that bump in the sales tax to fund, the care team. Did I wish there were other ways to do it other than, the most regressive means that we have? Yes,
Yeah.
of course.
That's the tool that the state gave you, essentially,
Right.
there. A quick one on the care team there. There's been a lot of talk about, hey, let's make sure they can get dispatched by themselves rather than having to go with police, which is the situation right now, this single dispatch model out there. I know that's something that has to be negotiated with the police officers union, but can you talk to me about that? Because I think a lot of people are clamoring for that, too, including Care Chief Amy Barden.
Right. And that would be an ideal situation. But I also know that, when that initial 911 call comes in, we're not going to send somebody in that's an unarmed civilian into a situation where they may be in danger. That's a lot of times where you do have that co-response. Officer gets there, determines, okay, the scene is safe, we can bring in the care team.
Okay.
We don't want to put them at risk. And I've talked to mental health providers in the past who, even with our crisis response unit, that teams a mental health professional with a police officer.
That's right.
And they go out, in tandem. Because, you could send that MHP out there, but they're not going to necessarily feel secure going out there by themselves, not knowing what they're walking into.
Mental health professional, I understand what you're saying. That's
So that's why you have that dual dispatch. And when you can get to a situation where it's like, okay, this is something where they can go by themselves, but having that backup just in case, for that MHP's safety. Just like with our community service officers. Yes, we can send community service officers out to something right now without having a uniformed officer go with them, but that's a very narrow band of responses.
Okay.
So again, thought and care needs to be put into that before we're putting someone in a situation where they have their safety being compromised.
To be continued. I know that discussion will be. I wanted to talk more about the budget proposal from the mayor because it appears he's really banking on voters passing the Seattle Shield measure, Prop 2, which would change the city's business and occupation tax system and raise about $80 million if voters approve it, plus the Families Education Preschool and Promise Levy, which could help the budget even more. I know Seattle voters historically really like to approve taxes, but does it bother you at all that those funds are included in the budget before the election? What do you think about that?
What bothers me more is that we have to keep going back to voters again and again and again and saying, hey, help us out, right? We can get into the philosophy of what I think should happen on the state level, so we don't have to keep going to these regressive measures like property tax and and sales tax. And Seattle voters have been generous. At a certain point, they're probably going to get tired of that, right? So that's my worry. Is we are asking so much of our citizenry to fund so many things that are essential. Okay, and again, I know that generosity, and it's like, hey, if this is going to help some folks, count me in.
Yep.
Is there a better way to do it? Yeah, but that's going to require some partnership with our folks on the state level.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Another discussion that is going to continue.
To be continued.
That's right. I did want to mention this. Your work on the council is essentially done after Election Day because of the temporary role you're serving. The budget won't be final for a few weeks after that. But I know you want to guide this process with the role that you have and in the time that you have. Can you talk to me about that, what you're going to be doing over the next 6 weeks plus here to really guide this?
All budget, all the time.
Okay.
And the way that the calendar is set up, I will be able to help get the budget across the finish line before I actually leave the seat. So, you have the November 4th election. The election results are certified on November 25th. I anticipate that we're going to have a final vote on the budget on November 21st.
Okay.
So that whoever is going to come behind me and occupy the seat doesn't have to come up to speed, doesn't have to,
Okay.
do all the homework and, vote on something that they haven't been intimately involved with.
Okay.
So I want to thank, the budget chair, Councilmember Strauss,
Yeah.
for scheduling it that way,
Yeah.
so that, I can put my stamp on it.
Fair enough. And let me know about that. Let's talk about some of your budget priorities, maybe some specific things for District 2. What's on your mind?
Well, there are some things that were important to us that we did get some into the mayor's budget, like the Thunderbird Treatment Center, funding for the Pearl Warren building, the demolition of that building, so that the Indian Commission can do a housing.
Yes.
Put housing at the
Right.
the location of the old navigation center.
Okay.
And there are some other funding priorities that we're looking at. One for me is Tubman Health Center. They provide gender affirming care and reproductive care in District 2. So I'd like to see some funding go to them. I mentioned earlier, funding for our tenants' rights.
Yeah.
Like the Dental Law Center, for example, and other organizations that are in that realm that are providing supports for tenants to help keep them in their homes.
Okay.
So that's something I'm going to be looking at in terms of, the anti-displacement.
Right.
You may know that back in June, we did an anti-displacement resource fair.
Yes.
At the Rainier Beach Community Center, bringing together different entities that have some piece of something that can help people stay in their homes, whether it's rental assistance, home low or no cost home repair, discounts on utilities, tax breaks. And a lot of the providers we had, many of them did not know the others provided the amount of resources that they did. So when I look at those anti-displacement resources, and a focus of mine is keeping people housed, keeping people in their home, building generational wealth, pushing back on gentrification. When we can bring those resources to folks, and when we can promote programs that will help people stay in their homes and not face eviction, I want to support those efforts.
Got it. And let's talk a little bit more about housing. I'd like to guide our conversation towards the comprehensive plan. This, of course, is the plan for urban growth in Seattle over the next 20 years. The council just passed phase 1 of this plan in mid-September. I know you weren't there for one of the big days of voting on this, which was an excused absence. I should point that out. But some of our viewers still do have some questions for you. The main issue I'm hearing from them is this. Did the comprehensive plan do enough to deal with Seattle's housing crisis? Robin boiled it down like this. In the recent voting on the comp plan, a number of council members requested less growth for their districts. What does Councilmember Solomon think of this new district focus? It seems to me that districts that have less growth and more homeowners will continue to get less growth, while districts with more renters will get more growth. Some thoughts about that?
Something I've been saying, early on since I've been here is when it comes to the comprehensive plan, D2 already has the density. Okay, I would like to see that density spread out throughout the city, throughout more neighborhoods. So again, we got it in D2. It should be shared. Let's share that wealth, right? You mentioned earlier about building generational wealth.
Yeah.
Okay. When I look at some projects that are, helping families build those ADUs or DADUs on their own parcels.
The accessory dwelling units. Yep, keep going.
Right. So the accessory dwelling units, the detached accessory dwelling units, make it easier for families to do that so they can have, grandma and grandpa in one,
Sure.
Mom and dad in the other, kids, all on the same parcel, right? And again, keeping families together, helping build that generational wealth. And those are the kind of things I'm looking in the comp plan. I'm looking at also trees, right? How do we, and I know this is a big...
This is a big battle for the
big
council.
Big battle, yeah. A couple things on that. One, we probably need to re-examine the tree code and strengthen it. And when I look at some of the amendments, I felt that there are some amendments that need to be tackled separately from the comp plan.
I see.
Right.
Needs to be strengthened. We need to protect more trees, or
we
what are you
need to
saying?
protect more trees. And here's the thing that's always struck me is that you've got one side that says we need to preserve the tree canopy, and then you have another side that says, but we need more housing, we need more densities. And I don't see it as an either or. I see it as a both and. We can have density and we can have trees. It's just a matter of how you design, the project. Does that mean that you go vertical? Yeah, it probably means you go vertical because we've only got so much of a footprint in terms of how much real estate we got. If we're going to increase density, we're going to have to go higher, right? If we want to increase our tree canopy, we're going to have to go higher. We're going to have to look at setbacks. We're going to have to look at incentives to preserve, those tier 1 and tier 2 trees, rather than having them cut down.
Right. Those are the bigger trees out there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So again, I've heard arguments on both sides, and I think we can do both. We can, have more trees. We can increase our tree canopy, and we can increase our housing stock. We can do both.
Okay.
We just need to sit down and figure out how to do it. And some of the amendments that were passed, try to get to that flexibility to allow for that.
Okay. And we got a ton of questions about this with the comprehensive plan. Kyle actually sent us one about your work in CPTED, C-P-T-E-D, crime prevention through environmental design, something you're trying to codify in the city law. We've talked about that before on the show. Kyle asks this: as someone very invested in crime prevention, that would be you, I'd also love to hear the council member speak to the role he believes housing insecurity plays in the sorts of crimes he seeks to address. Some thoughts about that?
Wow. Well, first, I do want to acknowledge that one of the amendments that was put forward in the comp plan, I believe it was Amendment 32 by Councilmember Kettle, inserts CPTED into the comprehensive plan. Also, we're looking at design review, interim design review legislation and permanent design review legislation that's coming probably the spring of 2026. Right. CPTED's going to be baked into that as well. Then you probably know that the Office of Economic Development announced their Back to Business program, basically their storefront improvement program. CPTED's in there.
This is stuff that's going to be happening after you leave office, it sounds like. Okay.
But it's there, especially with the storefront improvement program. It's already in there. And when I look at CPTED, it's basically a way to make public safety investments without spending public safety dollars.
Okay.
If you can design a space to be welcoming, where you encourage community interaction, that community connection actually helps drive crime down.
I was going to say housing insecurity was the question.
Right, housing insecurity.
Yeah, that does have a connection to crime.
So when you're talking about housing insecurity, I think that's not necessarily a CPTED thing.
Okay.
Right. The one way to address housing insecurity is build more housing.
Okay. All right. Okay?
Yet when we build that housing, build it so it's safer for everybody to be in there.
Okay.
So, so CPTED plays a role in the design. But not necessarily in the amount of units that are produced.
Okay, right. Thank you for that. Yeah, I did want to move on to another piece with this because we got a ton of great questions. Blake was asking this one because the council was dealing with more than 100 amendments to the comprehensive plan.
Only 114.
Yeah, but who's counting? Some of which were more rushed than others, and Blake had a question about that. Last-minute walk-on amendments make it hard to follow council actions, and lately it seems like there are more of them. In your view, why do these happen, and what can be done to reduce them so community can better follow council process? What do you got?
There are times when you're looking at some legislation and going, okay, I see it, I get it, but I got an idea. I got something that may make it a little bit better. So when you see those, and
is there an example you can think of?
Yes, I can think of an example with the roofs to roofs legislation that just passed yesterday.
That's right.
There were some last-minute amendments that Councilmember Hollingsworth had that were fantastic. That actually strengthened the bill and actually got it passed unanimously.
Yeah, this is another affordable housing measure out there.
Right. So that's an example of, sometimes those last-minute things, it's like the last-minute idea. And most council members will tell you that, they're not a fan of walk-on amendments because they haven't had a chance to, digest them and, really dig into them, which is often why when there are amendments, we do want to take time to actually absorb them and say, okay, well, what does this mean? Asking questions of central staff, asking questions of our legal counsel. Right. What is the impact of these things that we're getting ready to vote on? So, the decisions are informed, right? We're not going up there and, pulling things out of the air going, yeah, this sounds good. And,
Okay.
yeah. So there is
It does make it challenging, though,
It
I
does,
think,
yeah.
for people to follow.
Right, right. So it might make it challenging for some folks to follow when they don't see the things ahead of time.
Okay.
And we acknowledge that.
Okay.
Sometimes, though, it's necessary in order to make the legislation better.
Okay, thank you for that. The council just had a very hard-fought debate over expanding the use of surveillance cameras from the Seattle Police Department. Cameras will be added in the Capitol Hill neighborhood, Stadium District, areas near Garfield High as a way to fight crime and help police investigations. This went through with a 7-2 vote. Supporters like Councilmember Hollingsworth were saying this will be an important way to protect the city. Then you had opponents like Councilmember Rink, who was saying she was very worried the federal government would seize this information and use it in their mass deportation efforts.
People's windows that have been blown out, daycare shot up, families that have been hurt. Every single day, I have to talk to these people and deal with their trauma with them and comfort them every single day. And it's my job to help keep them safe.
I do not look forward to the day where we have to sit back up here on this dais and deal with the aftermath of our data being handed over to other actors. I do not want to be sitting up here in the future telling people, I'm sorry we put your community in danger, when we could have stopped it today. It is a matter of when, not if, our data will be handed over to the federal government and other actors.
You voted to approve this expansion of surveillance cameras. Why?
Okay. Probably more than anybody else on the dais, I know these systems.
You have a background with this.
Yeah, I have a background in it. It was made in public commentary that there are two Intel guys that are on the council. Actually, there are three.
Oh, okay.
I used to work in what's called an indication and warning center. I'm looking at information in real time as to the events that are going on. And if I'm not paying attention, or if I screw up, bad things could happen.
Is this part of your military background?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So the worst thing that could happen would be, not the worst thing. One thing that could happen would be an international incident. The worst thing that could happen is that people would die. Right. So I took that responsibility very seriously. So when I look at the Real-Time Crime Center, I think about that more along the lines of the Indication and Warning Center. And then when I look at, camera systems, something I mentioned, during the debate was, one, these are investigative tools.
Okay.
Two, for something to be investigated or even to be assigned, it needs to be solvable. Right. So what do you need for something to be solvable? You need hard evidence. You need a credible witness, or you need video surveillance. Okay. And when I think about the communities that I've worked with, especially in D2, who, we're talking about shootings, we're talking about break-ins, where the only way that we were able to identify and arrest is because there was video cameras.
Yeah.
I've also talked to the vendors and about
who provide these cameras and systems.
The different. There's so many different surveillance technologies out there. So many different surveillance companies.
Okay.
And again, I have an understanding of how they work.
Okay.
And my thing about cameras is, if you've got a camera but you don't have a protocol for what's done with the footage, then it's like, okay, you pick something up. Camera picks something up, but who's doing anything about what's being picked up?
And I think that's the concern. I mean, because Washington, D.C., it was essentially a situation, I know it's a different city than Seattle, but essentially feds came in and took over that real-time crime system, and I think people are worried that would happen here in Seattle.
Right, and I look at the safeguards that have been built into the legislation and say, okay, if ICE comes fishing, we're going to shut the program down, right? So, and thinking about the data retention, let me just
Please.
reiterate. I am comfortable with the protections that have been built into that legislation to push back on any attempts of the feds to try to get that footage. In the meantime, if I've got a shooting at Rainier Beach, the community center, which happened right by South Shore.
Oh, okay.
Last Monday.
Oh, wow.
Okay. When I have, our trans neighbors being beat up by 6 or 7 guys on Cap Hill, I would like to have footage of the guys who did that beatdown,
Okay.
so that we can identify them and hold them accountable.
Okay.
So this is where, I'm looking at these technologies as tools to help problem solve, to help identify, and to help hold folks accountable for the harm they're causing in our community.
Thank you. I wanted to talk about another police issue here. SPD working on getting officers back into Seattle schools. The school district is discussing having a cop at Garfield High in the next few weeks here. Officers were taken out of Seattle schools in June of 2020. I know this isn't your call directly. It's for schools to decide, but is this something you'd like to see? Do you think this would be helpful?
Absolutely.
Okay, why?
Because when I think about the school officers that I knew, like Benny Radford at Garfield, or Aaron Lucas or Jojo Camarnero that were down in the South End at South Shore and Rainier Beach, they were an asset to the kids. They cared about the kids. They weren't there for enforcement purposes. They
Wasn't
were
a discipline type of thing?
No, they weren't there for discipline. Benny would actually, be at the door as kids were coming in, greeting them and say, "Hey man, you weren't here yesterday. How you doing? You doing okay? Everything good at home? Hey bro, you look like you're hungry. You need a granola bar?"
Yeah.
I mean, that was the kind of relationship that Benny had with those kids.
Yeah.
And when I talk to different law enforcement agencies around the state, and actually our educational services districts, they want to have a relationship with the local law enforcement, not for discipline purposes, but just relationship building.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And to be a resource, not only for the school, but to be a resource for those kids.
Yeah. I need to wrap up with you. We have about a minute and a half left here. You have a few weeks left as a council member before that November deadline when you hand over your role to whoever wins out in District 2. Can you reflect on what you've been able to do over this past year? Was this what you expected with this job?
People have asked me, is it what you expected? And I got to be honest, I had no idea what to expect. I will say a couple things. One, we have a great council. I can't say enough about my colleagues, the interactions, the camaraderie, the things that we've been able to work together to actually get done. So that's one. I also got a shout out to my staff. I've been able to come in and make a checklist of everything I want to get done, and I frustrate them because I keep adding to that list.
Okay, yeah.
And we're able to check a lot of things off. I would not have had the success in getting stuff done if it hadn't been for my staff. So shout out to Sarah Mays, Murphy Bush, Christine Hendrickson, and Thaddeus Gregory. So love you guys.
All right. Had to be done. Yeah.
And so I'm going to be happy to welcome the new person in and say, here's what we got done. Now, what do you need teed up for you? Until, when you get here, so that we can tee it up so we can set you up for success.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for this. That's Councilmember Mark Solomon. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you.
All right.
I appreciate the opportunity.
You bet. I'm Brian Callanan. We'll see you next time on Council Edition.